back of the rim. Garnett on the slam. Using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry.
Quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Boingvert. Boingvert is the best-selling jumping program for athletes in the world with over 500,000 users. On average, users have gained 10.3 inches on their jump, there's no weights necessary, and the program can be done right at home with 24/7 customer service. If you're interested, the link to the program will be both in the comment section and in the description, and be sure to use my promo code DOM2K for 20% off of your purchase. 7 years. Don't look now, but that's how far along we are into the career of Damian Lillard, which is both fascinating and a bit disheartening. It's fascinating because it doesn't feel like more than 2 years ago that he made a fan out of me as a rookie, posting an amazing NBA debut of 23 points and 11 assists to capture the dub over what we thought would be the Lakers' new super team, breaking what was then Steph Curry's record of three-pointers made in a season by a rookie. I was immediately drawn in, psyched to see a new prospect for the future of the league. The disheartening part is that the years are just flying off the calendar, yet he hasn't really even gotten close to contending for anything yet. And being that he did 4 years in college, it's not like he's got a ton of time. He's already 28 years old doing his 7th year in Portland, while being bound to 3 more years on his contract with no player option. So the chances are, we're about to see another Kevin Garnett type situation, especially when you consider how firmly and frequently he reiterates that he does not want to sell out for a championship. However, that doesn't mean he hasn't turned out to be a great player. And like so many others who fall into that category, he had to wait a bit before hearing his name called in the draft. Lillard was selected 6th overall in 2012, and as you've probably guessed, he's made a better career than a majority of the guys who went in front of him. So as usual, that means we've got a job to do. Today, we'll examine exactly why 5 NBA franchises passed on a polished 4-year college product and what became of each player taken before him. But as you'll see this time, despite hindsight, Lillard was likely drafted exactly where he was supposed to be. Lillard played his college ball at Weber State, which didn't really get him the recognition he would have received elsewhere, but the talent he displayed there clearly spilled over into the league. For pretty much all 4 years, he steadily improved until he was a senior, averaging 25 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists, while also picking up 2 Big Sky Conference Player of the Year awards. And while knowing that can make it seem like he was just slept on because he wasn't at a bigger school, the truth is that most of the teams who passed on him did not need a point guard. And rarely do you ever see franchises trying to run 2 small guards unless they're run by David Kahn. Hypothetically, Lillard could be a successful shooting guard on offense, but in the eyes of these squads that were already set at the 1, it clearly made sense to try and improve on another position with the top 5 pick. Oh yeah, and of course there was the rare case where there was just a more obvious choice. That brings us to the number 1 pick in the 2012 NBA draft, Anthony soon-to-be a Celtic Davis. Coming out of college, he was pretty much a sure thing in most people's minds. So while Lillard has carved out his own path in the league, he still doesn't have any business being chosen over AD for anything today. Davis was immediately part of Team USA before playing a single pro game, and about the only knock on his career so far is that he's injury prone. So since we all clearly know where he is right now and what he's been up to, I'll use this time to point out the stark contrast in their career decisions as we speak. Having played the same amount of years and being in similar situations, what sticks out is that Davis has been placed on a minutes restriction to keep him fresh for a trade this summer. Meanwhile, Lillard is speaking of spending his career in Portland through any means necessary. While Davis probably would have enjoyed a trade to LA this last month, and will likely end up on a contender next year after all but forcing his way out of New Orleans a year early, Lillard seems as if he'd rather not win a championship at all than have soured relationships on the way to one. The perception of these approaches probably varies from person to person, but it is still really interesting to look at these two guys coming from the same draft, reacting very differently to how the league has changed in terms of players controlling their careers. However, the number 2 spot features no such comparisons, as the Hornets selected Davis's college teammate, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. And if you've seen the last video, you're now realizing that the Hornets missed out on Giannis and Lillard in back-to-back years. But you could probably figure out that Lillard to the Hornets would have made no sense, unlike the Giannis miss. The summer before this, they just selected Kemba Walker as their point guard for the future. And while he hadn't broke out as a leader or anything in his rookie year, it would have made little sense to select another guard unless they planned on moving Kemba, or if they were totally convinced that the two could play together. On a 7-win Bobcat team that didn't really have any promising forwards, Gilchrist was a very sensible choice, but that's obviously not a decision that's panned out the way they'd hoped. Gilchrist is still young today, but he's shown no significant strides in his career that justify him being a 2 pick, and he's still playing for Charlotte today, averaging 7 points, while he started merely 1 game this entire season. The plan was probably to have him and Kemba lead the franchise into the future, but if you came back to this video in about 4 months and the Hornets were in a full-on rebuild having lost Kemba, I would not be surprised. So it did make sense to pass on Lillard at the time, but if you're a Hornets fan, it has to sting knowing that you could have realistically had both Lillard and Giannis today instead of spiraling towards uncertainty. Washington selected Bradley Beal with the number 3 pick, and doing so with John Wall leading the roster made total sense. As a matter of fact, that's a move that looked great with a lot of potential all the way up until this season, where it's become clear that the franchise will need to find a new direction. While Beal's name was floated in Laker trade rumors last month, as with every star these days, nothing ever came of it, as with most stars. And he's currently having his best year as a pro. He averages 26 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, and leads the league in minutes played per game at 38. Of course, there's all but no hype around his production, as Washington had an underwhelming start to the season. They're still losing as we speak, so for the time being, not only is Beal carrying the load there, he's quite literally being run into the ground as he leads the NBA in miles ran per game at 2.8 every single night. So he's young, he can take it, and if anything, this opportunity has fully begun to justify how high he was taken in the draft. And from this point on, he'll either become trade bait to kick off a rebuild, or the new cornerstone of the Wizards franchise. He does have 3 years left on his contract, so building around him seems to make the most sense. At the 4th slot, the one and only Dion Waiters was selected before Damian Lillard. Of course, as usual, that's not as bad as it sounds considering that Cleveland had Kyrie, and therefore no justifiable use for Damian Lillard. Although it only took 2 seasons for Waiters to be traded via LeBron making his return to Cleveland, there was a point in time where he looked like he might break out. Specifically, his first year with the Miami Heat, where he averaged 16 points a game and visually just looked impressive overall. However, that was 2 seasons ago, and injuries have basically stifled whatever real potential he was showing, as he's played 46, 30, and 28 games since the 2017 season. So he is back right now, he's playing, but the numbers aren't all that impressive, and it's not likely that he'll ever become a player comparable to Lillard. But just like with passing on Giannis, Cleveland missed Lillard and moved Waiters on their way to an eventual title, so not a whole lot of regret there. And finally, the infamous pick before a superstar player. Who's the unlucky contestant this time? It's actually Damian Lillard's former teammate from 2015, Thomas Robinson. Isn't that crazy? Shabazz Muhammad was selected before Giannis in our last video, and then he ended up on the team with him before making his way out of the league. It's like a rite of passage on your way out to face the guy you were picked in front of at this point. Anyways, the Robinson pick still sticks with me because I remember watching the 2012 NBA draft, and I've never forgotten this mini speech.
Thomas, when you consider the personal tragedy you underwent during the course of the last year, to make it this far, what does it mean?
Just happy to be there, man. Thank God I'm here.
A year ago, you were the 6th man on the Kansas team. This year, All-American, played for a national championship, Big 12 Conference Player of the Year. How did you make that leap?
I ain't stopping for nobody. I got work to do, and I'm going to do it.
Congratulations. Some things are bigger than basketball. Heather Cox, over to you.
Robinson's best year of college was his last year, where his playing time and averages jumped to 18 points and 12 rebounds a game, on his way to becoming the Big 12 Player of the Year and playing in the national championship game where he grabbed 17 rebounds. Not only did he look like a promising player, but he had obvious reason to be motivated as his grandmother, grandfather, and mother all died within a month of each other. All he really had left at that point was his little sister, and that explains a lot of his emotions on draft night. Unfortunately, to this point in his NBA career, things just have not really worked out. He got traded just 51 games through his rookie season, and wound up playing for 6 teams in 7 years. That speaks to what he focused on in 2017 interviews, where he explained that he was just really craving stability. He lamented that he wasn't able to just stay in one place with one system, a consistent set of coaches, and just kind of master what his role was. Robinson hasn't played in the league now since 2017 in his final stint for the Los Angeles Lakers, and he only averaged 5 points and 4 rebounds for his career. His per 36 minutes showed some potential in LA. Those were 16 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 steals. He talked about how much he loved playing for Luke Walton and how supportive he was to his game as a coach. He was hoping to stay in LA as his life was really getting settled in, but despite telling him how much they loved his energy, the Lakers chose a different direction. Since being rejected by LA, he's played basketball in the EuroLeague, signed with the Atlanta Hawks in August of 2018 only to be waived after preseason, and he now plays in China. Over there, he's averaging 22 points and 14 rebounds, as you may expect, and now we're just gonna have to wait and see if he ever gets a shot in the league again. From what I found, he's definitely not away from the NBA due to a lack of work ethic. He admitted that throughout his time in the league, for the first few years at least, he just had tunnel vision and trying to prove that he belonged. And that's understandable for a player that was routinely being traded after being a top 5 pick. At the end of his LA run, he sounded like a guy who knew what his role was, and he was just trying to do everything he could to fill that role to exist in this league. A shot just hasn't opened up for him since then. He's only 27 years old, so there's still time, and knowing his story, I'm definitely rooting for him to make it back and find a stable role on a team. Anyways, why did the Kings go that route? Because if you're keeping count, in all 3 of the videos done in this format so far, they've now missed out on Curry, Giannis, Lillard, and that's not even putting a dent in their list of misses. Well, at least for this one, like everybody else on this list, and more so for them actually, they had no use or room for Lillard. The 2012 Kings had Tyreke Evans, Marcus Thornton, Isaiah Thomas, and Jimmer Fredette. Those were all guards, and it's funny because in doing research, I actually found articles where Kings fans were upset that their team was even looking in Lillard's direction. And yeah, Sacramento keeps popping up on these lists of misses, so I don't know how many passes to give them. But at the time, I will admit that it would have been difficult to justify drafting a 5th guard with a top 5 pick, especially when they were happy to see Thomas Robinson fall to them, which was unexpected. But on the other hand, a lot of people thought Tyreke Evans should have been playing forward by that point, and they weren't yet making good use of Fredette, which actually they never did, so I don't know. Either way, Portland was in perfect position to take Lillard by the time he'd fallen to them. They were slowly trying to step out of an era where all their potential died due to injury, and they were primed for a star point guard to take over. It wasn't even long after drafting Lillard that they started winning 50 games, looking like a team soon to be contending. Of course, everybody ditched him in basically one summer, and for that, he never got enough recognition for keeping the Blazers from just smoldering after that. Think about it, all at one time. LaMarcus Aldridge, Wesley Matthews, Nicholas Batum, that entire core just took off at a time when it looked like he'd be one of the lucky young guys to be able to lead a great core from the start despite being a lottery pick. Even with that hurdle, the Blazers haven't missed the playoffs one time since that happened. But now the future is just still so uncertain. Maybe they'll hit the lottery and find a star player to join him before his best years all toil away. But what looks more likely to happen is a bevy of 1st and 2nd round outs before the team officially decides to start over, where he'll then cooperate and look to be moved to a team that he can contend on. I hope that it works out the other way, but Lillard's perspective is at least to be admired. Just like KG, he's not jumping at the chance to sell out on the franchise that took a chance on him. It may not be the best career move, but some things are just bigger than basketball, and hopefully he'll be rewarded for standing tall through all the disappointments.